Hello. Okay, we're going to go pretty quick, hopefully, because I'm trying to get up to 24 in the book of Exodus. And this is, okay, so I'm going to switch us to the book to kind of get you going. Okay, so this is the third biblical period. That was the first, the early world patriarchs. Now we're in the Egypt and Exodus. We're in the book of Exodus. So of the 12 periods, we're on the third. And of the narrative books, we're on the second. There are 14. The supplemental books for this particular period towards the end is Leviticus. Okay? And then there's, for God's family plan, one covenant. This is my favorite one. And this tells you exactly where you'll find it. Okay, so and then this gives you the setting, some of the key events, what's happening in Egypt at the time. And the world ruler is Egypt. And down here for the secular history, an interesting fact is that it was the first Greek language was first written in 1450 BC. So that has some other facts, but I thought that was an interesting one. Okay, so we start here with the summary, one good, concise paragraph. Well, it's one paragraph. It's just that it's small because there's a lot underneath. So, and then I call that the trailer, that part. And then we go into the narrative. And here's about 4.5 good pages, tells you what's going to happen in the third period of the third period of the 12. And remember, we're going through the documentation of God's plan. So we ended Genesis on Joseph saved his family after his brother sold them into slavery. He rose to power because he was greatly revered by the Pharaoh, the king, for interpreting his dreams. And once the famine took hold, Joseph was able to move his family to Egypt, feed them, take care of them under the king. Long after Joseph and his family settled, a new king came along and enslaved their descendants. So if you look back to God's warning to Abraham back in Genesis 15:12, remember, Abram fell into a deep dread of darkness that fell upon him. And the Lord said that your descendants will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and they will become slaves there, and they will be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation which they serve, and afterwards they shall come into great possession. Remember I told you that interested me? Well, this answered all those questions. It began long after Jacob and his 12 sons and their family settled in Egypt, and the new king has a severe policy change and enslaves the Israelite, which includes the descendants of Jacob and his 12 sons. And I just want to say the supplemental book after that, when you're done reading them, would be Leviticus, which Caven says in his CDs is more for priests, but there are laws and rituals foreshadowing the Eucharist of the bread of presence kept in the tabernacle. Consisted of 12 loaves of bread described as a memorial offering and a covenant forever. Now, what I liked in this, he talks about that prefiguring of the Eucharist, the prefiguring of the baptism, and then and the prefiguring of the baptism is the crossing of the Red Sea and the water. You'll see in this one the water, and then this one is the prefiguring of the Eucharist, and that will come in this too. Now here, what I liked best about his narrative here was his quote with St. Augustine. The law was given that grace might be sought, and grace sought that the law might be fulfilled. So that encompasses this. So okay, so we start with the key event, and that is Israel is enslaved, which starts down here. But it starts with the sons of Israel. It gives all the names of Joseph's brothers and states the offspring of Jacob of 70 or more by then, and the land was filled with his descendants. So began the oppression of the new king. Did not know Joseph. There were too many Israelites, he said, and they maybe will multiply and join, and they'll fight against us and escape, so we should work them hard. So the king of Egypt instructed the Hebrew midwives. They were told to drown all the male babies in Exodus 1, but the female midwives said, no, we're letting them live. But they hid them. So they were afraid of God. So God dealt with the midwives because they didn't kill the children and made them strong and multiplied the Israelites. So then we get into 2. And that is the birth of young Moses. A husband and wife from the house of Levi, which are descendants of Joseph's brother, had a baby boy. We'll get to the burning bush over here. They had a baby boy. They hid him for 3 months. Finally, they couldn't hide him anymore. They put him in a basket, put him in the Nile. They secretly watched the Pharaoh's daughter come to bathe, who saw baby Moses floating in the bushes. She took pity on him. Moses's mother, her sister, was there, and she asked the daughter if she should get a Hebrew woman to nurse him for her. She says yes. So the sister points to Moses's mother. Of course, the daughter doesn't know. And the king's daughter says, I'll pay for you to nurse him for me. The king's daughter named him Moses because she drew him out of the water and raised him as her adopted son. Moses grew up. One day we know these stories, but I'm just going to go into them. The first half is not as good as the second half of this part, just so you know. The second half is amazing. So let's just get through the first, and then we'll get to the second taping. He beat the Egyptian because he was a Hebrew man, of course, and he looked around, saw no one could see him, and he killed the Egyptian. And then he's forced to flee to Midian after one of the Hebrew men made known about the murder, so the king would surely kill Moses, even though I guess he was his grandfather by adoption. So then the key event is the burning bush. And Moses in the burning bush. So Moses meets a family in Midian, marries the daughter, has children, begins to look after the flock for his father-in-law when God leads him to the mountain. So he appeared in a flame of fire and told him he needed him to rescue his people and go back to Egypt and get them and leave them out. And Moses asked, who should he say he is? He said, they're not going to believe me. He says, I am. Of course, we know that the Lord said in Hebrew, Yahweh, the Lord. But he said, I am. But in Hebrew, it's Yahweh. The Lord God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. God tells him these things, these words. Although he was thought highly of, he promised to take him and his people to the land of flowing with milk and honey. He tells them, go to the king, tell him you have met with God, and let my people go. I promise I'll be with you. And Moses is like, I can't even speak right. And he resists. And God said, I'll fix that. So, and he tells him, you're going to go and you're going to take all the spoils, basically rob the Egyptians of all their jewelry and all that before we leave, and we'll get into that. God tells him this. So I guess he felt he owed it to him. So Exodus 4. Okay, so God reveals his name. Exodus 4. God gives Moses help for his mission. Of course, we know he resisted and he says he can't speak right. God says he'll fix it. So Moses goes and he takes the rod for God. God gives him a rod and told him to show the king the miracles that he showed him, and then tell the king to let his people go. God's firstborn, who are the Israelites. God calls the Israelites his firstborn. He said, let them go free so they can worship me, or I will slay the king and his firstborn son. So God has Aaron and meets God has Aaron meet Moses at the top of the mountain of God to help him convince the Israelites. When they hear, they are amazed that someone's coming to rescue them. So they bow down and worship God for coming to rescue them. But it's not that simple. When we get to Exodus 5, they tell that God commands, let my people go. The king says, I don't know this God, and says, they just they just want to worship because they're idle, and he makes the Israelites' burdens heavier and beats the Israelites when they complain and works them harder and harder. So, of course, God promises deliverance. He says, now watch what I do to King Pharaoh, to the king, the Pharaoh. Now the Israelites blame Moses and Aaron for the hard work, and they won't listen to them because their spirit is broken from the extra cruel bondage and the hardness of the king coming on them. And then for some reason, this all goes into the genealogy of Moses and Aaron, back all the way back to Jacob and Abraham, with all the names of the generations for some reason. So then we get to 7, and Pharaoh, he sends Moses back to the king, Pharaoh, because he tells him, God, they're not listening to me, and has Aaron do miracles. But the king, the king's heart is hardened, and he says, no. So God shows his power by sending 10 plagues onto Egypt. That's the next key event over here. And so he tells him, he sends Moses back to the king and has, and tells him, okay, I'm going to be sending 10 plagues, and the Nile turns to blood. All the fish die, the frogs cover Egypt, then the gnats, then the flies, then killed Egyptian livestock, all their livestock, the locusts. Each time the king said, okay, I'll stop, and I won't and then he won't let them go. After he says he'll stop and it all stops, he won't let them go. So God sends another plague and another one. Now I thought about that. Don't we sometimes promise God, I'll do what you want, I'll be good. And then how long before we're back to our old ways? Not that much longer. So, and the last two are interesting. So the last two were the darkness of 3 days, and that made me think about the 3 days of darkness that are supposed to come, that we've been warned of, to have our beeswax candles and all that kind of stuff. That kind of fits in with that for me. So, and then the last one, God's warning on the 10th plague, all firstborn of Egypt, and even their servants, I was like, but they're innocent. Why are they? But sometimes I've noticed in God's plan, sometimes innocent people die, and it's not always that person, but sometimes they die. But before that, the key event, Exodus and Passover. Let's get over here. So here's all the plagues. The warning of the final plague. So see, the 8th was the locust, the 9th was the darkness. Those were the 3 days that I really wonder. And then the warning of the first plague was the firstborn. And then here is the key event, the Exodus and the first Passover. God institutes a Passover to spare the Israelites. Jeff Cavins parallels this with the foreshadowing of the Eucharist in the Passover. Slay a lamb, smear its blood on the doorpost, and then consume it, and should be repeated as a memorial. He says that to enable each generation to enter the act of salvation, which includes us, and also parallels the Last Supper of Jesus, is the Passover lamb. Jeff Cavins just pulls this together. And I thought about our current corona plague, and I thought, wow, it seemed unfair. God struck down every firstborn, even the pharaohs. They didn't even have anything to do with it. And I think about the innocent people that have died in our current plague, like the priests that were still giving out the Eucharist. And I hope you put the Divine Mercy on your door, because that's our Passover, like the blood smeared on the door. So I hope you did. And then that's on my page if you don't know about that. It's posted there. And then Moses has them do the despoiling. God tells them to go to all the Egyptian people, and he would have them hand over all their jewels and their clothing. And that's what this is taught. And that just to me was crazy. So the Passover is instituted. 600,000, it's written the exact amount, men, not including women, leave Egypt. So that means maybe 1 million. Now in Israel, the population is right now is almost 9 million. There are about 7 million Jewish people in the USA. Now imagine if 6 million weren't killed in the Holocaust, how many more? But because this was many, many years. It's so sad. It makes me think of abortion. How many more people would be alive today if 1973 never happened? But in any case, they're guided by God, who is signaled by a pillar of a cloud. And that just amazed me. Where are we at with that? Okay, so the crossing of the Red Sea. Yeah, so where's the guiding? Okay, it is in here. Okay, so they're guided by the cloud. It is somewhere in here. I'm not going to look for it to take too much time for that. By a pillar of cloud. And this next key event is the crossing of the Red Sea. Jeff Cavins parallels it with the flood in Noah's time to Israelites crossing the Red Sea. Catholics see it as a prefigured baptism. Water destroys evil and becomes the means of salvation. Okay, so 13. Oh, there's the pillar of the cloud. Okay, so 13. Then the Lord told Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn. So we know we're supposed to do that to this day. Every firstborn of every family is supposed to be consecrated to God. Today, still. It's another foreshadowing of Jesus as well. And it says it actually says this in here. There should be a mark on their hand and between their eyes. That was strange to me. So the pillar of smoke during the day is fire. During the night is, or rather, during the night is fire. During the day, it's smoke, a cloud. Also, Joseph's bones. Joseph had told his descendants, God would visit you, and it says that in here. God would visit you, and you must carry my bones with you from here. So they are actually carrying Joseph's bones as they leave the land of Egypt. An interesting fact, chariot wheels that were found are now at the bottom of the Red Sea, are right now at the Wyatt Museum. They're dated all the way back to this time. I'm going to include a link to that as soon as I can. It will probably be in the comments section because I'm having a hard time figuring out how to edit. So naturally, I think about the poor horses that drowned, but the chariots were there. So we're going on to 14 here. God parts the Red Sea after he tells Moses to stretch out his hand. And the Israelites passed through on a dry floor of the sea. And the Lord said, when they follow you, I will get glory over all the men and the chariot and the horsemen that drown. Once again, innocent people die in God's plan, which really surprises me. I don't know why. I'll tell you sometime. Egyptians say, let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them. The Egyptians say, let us flee. They realize somebody's helping them. This is so there's when if God is parting the seas for them, and they try to turn around, but they can't get out because God clogs their wheels. It says it. It says not one survival, and it says there's a reason why there's no bones found at the bottom of the sea with the chariots, because it says dead Egyptians washed up on the seashore. So the Israelites are then fearful of God. They believe that Moses was the Lord's servant at that point. Finally, when they see the Red Sea parted, can you imagine? Of course. So the chariot wheels are at the museum. They're dated back to, they actually dated this all the way back to the time. And then I just want to say, and then there's actually a song written right here in the Bible, how they got away. Where is it? Yeah. The Song of Moses and Miriam. There is a song written in here in the Bible. Like, that shocked me. That they got away and they gave glory to God. Now is when they're after some time, the Israelites are thirsty. The Lord took the bitter water and made it sweet. I think with a tree, which made me think of the tree that they found recently. And they said that could help them with medicine. I just saw an article on that. But there the Lord made for them a law, and they were told they should always listen to him and follow commandments. He would put none of the diseases upon them, and he put on the Egyptians from the Lord your healer. Okay, so 16. So they're complaining about food and water, and God tests them, but he sends them manna on the ground in flakes from heaven. But he tells them clearly, on the 6th day, gather double, because you are not to gather on Sundays. You should have enough food so that you're not doing any work on Sundays. He talks about not working on the 7th day many, many times throughout this beginning of this Bible. And again, rest on Sunday, on the 7th day. He parallels manna with the Eucharist for Jeff Cavins, the prefigured Eucharist, and then the best part of the description of the taste of manna as wafers with honey. This is in here. As wafers with honey, since the promised land is described as land flowing with milk and honey, and the manna as a foretaste of the promised land in the new covenant. The new manna, the Eucharist, is a foretaste of heaven, is what Jeff Cavins calls it. So they get this wonderful, it's just amazing, this wonderful food that they get to eat. The people were angry, though, at Moses for no water. So the Lord tells Moses to hit the rock with a rod, and water comes from the rock, which Jeff Cavins notes St. Paul parallels this with the water from the rock, with the water from Christ's side on the cross. Again, another reason why I love Jeff Cavins' program and Jeff Cavins' Bible. These are just, they're gold. So they were attacked. Then they were attacked by the Amaleks, and they fight them off with the rod of God. And the Lord tells them, write a memorial about it. So Moses built an altar and a banner. And the Lord told him exactly what to write. Hand upon the banner of the Lord. The Lord will have war with the Amalek from generation to generation. I have an article on that too I'm going to put in the comments. Amazing. Okay. Moses, by 18, Moses' father-in-law brings him his wife and children, and they're so happy to see each other, of course. And then 19, Israelites get to Mount Sinai. God told Moses, all of these Israelites are mine. They are a holy nation and shall be my kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So when this says in the Bible, when the trumpet sounds on the 3rd day, bring my people washed and consecrated up to the mountain. God told Moses, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak to you and may also believe you forever. That was profound. Okay, so now 20, where God gives 10 commandments to Moses with the Israelites can hear God and they're afraid. And God says, people that hate him visit in anyone who hates him, he will visit iniquity and gross unfairness on their descendants, all the way to the 3rd generation of those who hate me. But I will show mercy upon thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Pray that your ancestors did not hate God, because it's been visited upon you. So that's why you want to love God, so that your descendants will have, and I hope someday my grandchildren watch this. Okay, so he says that, keep my commandments. And again, on the 7th day, do not work. Over and over again. Okay, so Cavins notes the first of the 10 commandments, 3 of them are love. The last 7 are love of neighbor. he said the very first one puts God first. The first three are love of God. And then at the end, God gives Moses laws about sacrifice and things like you should not go up the steps of my altar. I think about the altars in our church and I understand this reverence. Okay. So then God's covenant also is in that, and the laws for the Israelites. So that is all just amazing. Okay, so 21. Weird laws about buying and selling slaves concerning violence and harm. Had I not known all of this from Jeff Cavins, that would have freaked me out. I can understand why people have a hard time reading the Bible, because that could be confusing. The times were different, but it is a little disturbing at some points. It was made it hard to read. By the time we get to 22, the laws of restitution, social and religious laws, again, very different from today, but I guess the laws of restitution and those things are the foundation of governments like our courts today, and worldwide different court systems. But I have to warn you, some are very antiquated, but you can see where maybe it's the foundation for their justice systems worldwide. Okay, and he also mentions a sabbatical year. And again, rest on Sunday. Rest on Sunday, an annual feast. So the interesting part is it talks about the only document in history that gives land ownership thousands of years ago, then with a huge warning. Okay? This huge warning. The conquest of Canaan promised, which is Israel. He tells them, you do not rebel against him. And he says, when my angel goes before you, I'm going to get rid of all these people. And you shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do works toward their gods. You shall utterly overthrow them and break their pillars in pieces. You shall serve the Lord your God, and I will bless your bread and water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. None shall cast her young to be barren on your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send terror before you, which shocked me hearing this. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest you become desolate and the wild beasts multiply against you. They want them there to clear the land, which shocked me. It's like God is using people for his people, which shocked me. Little by little, I will drive them out before you until you are increased and possess the land, which they're still fighting over today. So it makes it very, very current to today. You shall make no covenant with them, with their gods. You shall not dwell in their land, lest they make sin against me. If you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. That right now is taking place against Israel. They are constantly being attacked by the Palestine. So the blood of the covenant with Moses. New understanding of the covenant. 21. The key event. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to get to 24. I don't think I am. I think I'm going to have to end here, but it ends on a very dramatic note. Look at that.